And we are back, and we just finished watching 1987's Moonstruck, rated PG, with a runtime of 1 hour and 42 minutes. We caught this on the TCM app, but it is also available to stream on Pluto TV, Roku, and to buy rent on Prime Video. This is the story of Loretta Castorini, played by Cher, a Brooklyn bookkeeper who finds herself engaged to one man but in love with his brother.
Mm-hmm.
This won an Academy Award for Cher as the main actress, and also a supporting Oscar for Olympia Dukakis, who plays Loretta's mother, and also a screenplay Oscar for John Patrick Shanley's screenplay for the film. This was, again, directed by Norman Jewison. What'd you think? This is your first time watching this film?
I thought it was good.
What did you think was good about it?
Growing up with Italians, yeah. It was,
felt very Italian.
Definitely felt very Italian.
Yeah.
There's a lot of arguing. That old lady at the airport who was just like cursing the plane. I've encountered people like that.
They're totally tracked.
Yeah, like somebody's cursing the plane. Somebody on the plane is wearing like a wreath of garlic to ward off the curse. I've seen those old Italian superstitions in person.
Well, also, she said that she cursed the plane because her sister took the guy away from her, not because she loved him, but because she wanted to give her sister the horns.
Yeah.
Oh my, that was like
the vendetta.
Yeah, that's such an Italian thing too. I was like, oh my goodness.
It's a big thing in Italian culture. I remember, I think there was like a story in my family where my mom, she like apparently like loved this aunt or whatever. And when she was a little girl, and they just one day, it was just like, we can't go to her house anymore. And it was like, why? And it was because her dad, my grandpa, apparently sat in the wrong chair. And that was it. That was it. Oh my God. Vendetta. No more family communications between those two parts of the family. It's over. You sat in the wrong chair.
Well, it's funny. I actually saw this in the theater when it came out. I liked it back then. I still like it. I mean, it's not my favorite film, but one of the things that I really appreciated about this film was growing up in a Irish-Italian neighborhood. I knew kids whose families were like this, and like you heard the stories. So this completely tracked to me. To me, it was funny. It was like, it's a Jewish director. When I originally saw it, I don't know why. Like, I didn't read the title cards. Like, I didn't realize that it was a Norman Jewison film until like years later, but I was like, oh, this is like an Italian American made this movie. Because it just felt so like I knew people like this, even though I wasn't Italian.
Well, I think that's the thing. Growing up where we grew up, it was like you were exposed to all these different cultures. When you went to school with all these kids, and then after school you hung out at their house and you saw how their parents were. And a lot of these people, maybe they're not like just like off the boat, but maybe they're just like their grandparents are off the boat or immigrants. And so you saw all these things. I mean, my friends, I saw Puerto Ricans and Dominicans and Russians and Jewish kids and Italians. And it was just this smorgasbord of cultures. I didn't even realize there was, from the Russians, said, well, no, that kid's not Russian. He's Turkish. And this one's Uzbekistani and all this other stuff. And then there's Arab kids. You get all of that. And it's just where we grew up. I mean, seriously, they call New York the melting pot for a reason. It really is. And it's kind of, I think that still exists to a certain degree, but I feel like over time, it feels like the melting pot is becoming less of a melting pot, and people are becoming more like they're self-segregating.
I can see that.
And to the point where you can't look at another culture and either admire it without possibly being accused of appropriating, or laugh without being accused of being insulting or demeaning, prejudiced. And it's a shame, because there's a lot, and I know from like when my grandpa would tell us stories, and he would hang out with, like, this is like back in the day. I mean, he was an Italian guy, and he kind of like one of his best friends was like an Irish guy, and I mean, we've all seen The Untouchables.
We know the words they use.
We know the words they use.
Yeah. Yes.
I mean, Sean Connery was not shy about his prejudices in that movie. But, I mean, they were just joke and kid with each other about that sort of stuff.
And many a truth is said in jest, right?
Many a truth is said in jest. Sometimes, there's...
Yeah, you're like,
you're like, don't stereotype me. And it's just sort of like, it's funny. Laugh about it. You got to laugh about yourself.
Yeah.
As time goes on, it's sort of like you can't laugh about anything without, oh my God, wait a minute. Oh, am I insulting or you're insulting me? And it's just like, not really. It was just sort of an innocent observation. Yeah. Please don't take it personally. It's, I don't know. I'm preaching.
No. I mean, we've definitely.
Yeah, but this movie takes place in. It was made late in the late 80s.
Where
people didn't give a shit about that sort of stuff anyway. Yeah, there was some. Oh, I'm not going to say that there wasn't stuff in the 80s that was deeply insulting to certain cultures. But this
there was,
but this isn't really one of them. And I think Italians. They can generally laugh at themselves. I mean, I'm sort of on the inside looking out, so I could say that, but maybe other people would find it offensive. I don't know. Usually they're people who are not Italian, and they're just like, how dare you insult Italian. Yeah. Although, I mean, I've heard my mom take offense to things that I'm just like, what are you, nuts?
Yeah.
There's nothing offensive about that.
Well, she gets upset about like the whole like mafia thing, right? She's like, why is every Italian portrayed as a mafioso,
as a mobster, which is very prevalent. I mean, even
to an extent, but
even to this day, you'll get that. But whatever.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say the other thing I really, really appreciated about this film was how we've talked about this in the past. How New York is sort of like a secondary character, and you see the streets, and it was nice to see what old Brooklyn looked like before rents were out of control. I guess it was weird to see the towers in the background. I think I turned to you a couple of times and I was like, oh look, the towers. It's so weird that they're not there anymore.
Yeah,
that is not the skyline anymore. So
and I forgot how much they stood out on the skyline, because all the other buildings have that sort of
dwarfed
grayness to them, but the towers were very bright. and reflective. I mean, they were they almost glowed amongst all the other buildings. So it was a bit.
They were newer too. A lot of
the
buildings
obviously
down there
were newer,
are super old. So,
but still, you really.
They really
did stand out. They were like an iconic part of the New York skyline for so long, and now that they're gone, it's just weird.
Yeah, well, it's weird to see them.
Weird seeing them.
Yeah, we also caught Trading Places the other day.
Yes,
and they're also in the backdrop there. So it's interesting to see what the city used to look like, and I think that even though it wasn't that long in the past, the streets are definitely much different. Everything looks different. I mean, you and I have had this conversation where we go to your old neighborhood. When I first met you, you lived in Billyburg before it became Billyburg. Yeah. And when you were there, it was very industrial. And now it's just like...
certain parts were just completely desolate. It was just like warehouses.
And now
abandoned warehouses.
There's not a space to be found.
Nah.
Everything has been just revamped. And
there's like multiplexes and
all sorts of stuff. Young families. I mean, that wasn't a thing when I was dating you. It was all just young artists and But anyway, so I also appreciate that about the film, because I love how it's almost like a historical document of the time. This is this movie came out in 87, so I'm assuming it was filmed in 85 or 86. So this is what mid-80s New York, Brooklyn, because the house that she lived in was in Brooklyn, and I think it was in Brooklyn Heights. Yeah. And even like when you see the inside of the house, like the wallpaper and the way the kitchen looked and stuff like that, I'm sure it's been remodeled to fuck now, and it doesn't look like that, because I think it's sold at least 2 or 3 times since that film was made. So I'm sure the inside is completely unrecognizable, but it's interesting to see how people lived and how spaces looked. And that house is obviously very old. And when you looked at it, like the kitchen There was no stainless steel.
No, you saw that tiny oven they were working with?
Yeah.
That was like an old style original oven.
Yes.
With no Sub-Zero on it.
Yeah. No.
Giant refrigerators.
Nothing. I mean, that's, So from that vantage point, I also appreciated the movie. Let's talk about the story. What did you think?
It was an entertaining story. It was interesting how, like, Danny Aiello was just he didn't know how to do anything.
Even Vincent Gardenia's character calls him like a big child, right?
Yeah.
A big baby.
Yeah. It was just he really didn't, like, she had to explain this is not how you propose.
Right.
You propose
you need a
like
ring.
This.
You got to get on your knee.
How could you not have a ring?
I don't know.
And he's Italian. He's supposed to be this like traditional Italian guy. He doesn't have a ring.
Well, I think it's because his mother wasn't there to namby-pamby him. She's in the mother country and living, which was also interesting because it's like usually you would think somebody like that would be close to his mother, so he would live not too far from his mother. But he's here with his brother, and I didn't know if they had any other siblings, but yeah, she's over in Palermo.
But
allegedly dying.
Yeah. And she's like marrying him just honestly because he is just sort of there and I guess the safe choice. And she just wanted it seems like the only thing that is a priority to her is doing it right, because her first marriage ended in tragedy because they didn't do it right, and it cursed or it cast an unlucky spell upon her marriage.
And that's also very Italian. Oh my God. Yes.
Yeah, there's a lot of like superstitions and you're getting a whammy, Yeah.
I think at one point doesn't Vincent Gardenia do that? He does the horns.
I
forgot
think so.
what scene,
I don't know.
But yeah.
Yeah, like that is like old school Italian with all the curses and whatnot. Yeah.
What did you think of the Ronny character? Lovingly played by Nicolas Cage.
Nicolas Cage is always entertaining, and he was just ridiculous in the beginning. He sort of like mellowed out the performance as the movie went on, but
on their first meeting,
he is just
crazy.
This crazed bread maker who with a maimed hand. And like it's funny the cause of the rift between him and his brother, even though it has nothing, the brother is completely out. It's not his fault in the slightest bit, but you could see him twisting his mind and twisting this logic and basically saying this is his fault. It made total sense if you're like this like completely irrational, passion-driven man.
Yes.
And that was the thing that was funny. The huge dichotomy between Danny Aiello and
Johnny and Ronny
and Nick Cage, Johnny and Ronny. Danny Aiello is this like doughy, fat, basically tubby guy who's been a mama's boy. Yeah. Can't really make any decisions for himself.
I mean, even at the airport when Loretta's dropping him off, she's like basically instructing him, like, call me when you land and this and that. And
telling him, keep your hat on for the sun. Things like that.
Yeah.
Just stuff that your mom would tell you.
Right.
Like, oh, you better wear a scarf or you're going to get sick or something like that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So that was kind of interesting because it's like she's in that relationship, she's the alpha.
Right. And then you compare that to Nicolas Cage. He's this lanky, thin guy who's just supremely passionate about whatever he's like running this business where he's he's like in the basement of the thing, shoving coal into a fire and doing all this stuff. And he's filthy.
Filthy.
He's covered in sweat. He's got tattoos. He's gross. Like, how are him and Danny Aiello
brothers?
Seriously, they look completely. You kind of have to
suspend disbelief, I guess.
Yeah, they're like, there's no way they both came out of the same womb.
And I love at the end of that speech when she goes, so Johnny asks Loretta to call Ronny to invite him to the wedding while he's going to Palermo to be with the mother who's allegedly on her deathbed. So she calls him. It doesn't go well, so she looks up the bakery and she goes there and she tells him that she's marrying Johnny, whatever. He goes into this impassioned speech. My favorite part of that was when he told the girl to bring him the knife that he was going to cut his throat and he wanted her to watch.
Bring me the big knife.
That always made me laugh. I don't know why, because I was like, oh my God, Italians are this crazy.
And that's like a funny thing because he's like, he has to specify. He's like, the big knife. Because there's always a big knife or a big spoon or a big fork. There's always the big something.
Yes.
Like I remember my friend Mike telling me that he knew it was time for a beating when the big spoon was off the wall.
And wasn't there an episode of Everybody Loves Raymond with the spoon and the fork?
Yeah.
That was hilarious. So then she, I guess, goes with him to his apartment. They talk, and the more they talk, the more they seem like they have more in common. And she winds up in bed with him.
Yeah, it was like boom.
Yeah. And that was interesting because you don't get that sense of Loretta in the beginning.
No, she's very down there. She's a numbers girl. She's doing people's taxes and bookkeeping.
And she seems like she has a very level head.
Very level head. And I think that was like sort of the interesting thing about it is that this guy was apparently just so passionate that it
swept her up.
Swept her up in it to where she had to like almost match it or like basically release what was always within her that she hadn't been able to release since the death of her first husband, when I guess she just sort of like bottled everything up and was just like, I messed this up, or we didn't do it the right way. I'm going to make sure everything's done the right way. Let's cross those T's and dot those I's, which makes sense. She's, like I said, she's who knows if she was a bookkeeper back then, but now she's doing books for the family and like dating the lamest mama's boy ever. Yeah.
Or even her dad is like making fun of her future fiance.
Yeah. He like nobody, they're like, oh, this guy.
Yeah.
And the mom even says, you love him.
She's like,
eh.
Yeah. She's like, and the mother's like, yeah, that's good.
That's good. It's less messy that way.
Right. And she's going through her own, the mother is also Rose, brilliantly played by Olympia Dukakis. She doesn't have a lot of screen time, but when she is on the screen, she fills it. And there's something just magical about her performance. And the scene towards the end where she basically turns to Vincent Gardenia and says, I want you to stop seeing her.
And he just sort of like, he stands and he just slams his hand on the table.
But then he
sits down and says,
he's like, okay. Yeah. That's like a very interesting scene as well, because I think that even though he had been a philanderer, I don't know if Mona was the only woman he had stepped outside of the marriage with, but I think that those relationships obviously didn't mean anything to him. They were just a way to maybe, in his mind, hold on to his youth or his mortality. I think there's a lot of that discussion about Rose's character asks different men, like, why do men chase women?
Yeah.
And I don't think John Mahoney's character gave her a great answer, but I think Vincent Gardenia's answer really resonated with her. Not Vincent Gardenia, Danny Aiello's answer resonated with her when he was talking about like the Bible, and Italians are very religious or whatever, or that type of Italian is very religious. And
she wasn't happy with that answer either. She was happy with the answer that he was just sort of off the cuff, where he just like, after that whole Bible thing, she was just like, no, why do they go after more than one? Because Danny Aiello was just describing basically love, that you're trying to find that missing piece of yourself in another person. But that doesn't answer the question, why do men chase after? She meant multiple women. And for that, he just says maybe they fear death, which is what she believed. And she just was like, yes, that's it. You agree with me.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
But in my mind, I don't know. That's like a way of, maybe she wants to believe that because she still loves her husband. And she wants to have some sort of like pitiful answer for it, where it's just like, oh, I'm doing it because I'm scared I'm going to die. And I don't know. In my mind, they're just doing it because they
can.
It's like they're thinking with their dick.
Yeah.
Bottom line is just look at her. She's prettier. My wife's getting old. I'm getting kind of bored of her. I'm going to chase after whatever
the John Mahoney character, who is
was John. Yeah, John Mahoney was basically she's pretty.
Right.
She's pretty. When I'm with her, I feel like that young man that I was, which I guess you could say in a roundabout way is a fear of death, but more in my mind, it's just this sort of selfish need to feel young. It's conceit. It's narcissism.
Yeah.
But those aren't pitiful. I mean, you could say they're pitiful, but the narcissist isn't sorry about being a narcissist.
No, never.
The guy who's afraid is sorry for being afraid. It's I'm sorry, I'm so weak. Whereas the narcissist is just like, yeah, I can score. I could just bag tons of chicks. Nothing wrong with that. The only thing wrong with cheating on your wife is getting caught.
Right.
That's the narcissist. So she wanted an answer that made her husband not a villain in the situation.
Well, because she loved him.
Because she loved him. Because she loved him. And
in spite of everything, in spite of and again, we don't know. Maybe he stepped out of the marriage prior to the Mona character, but...
Yeah, but
I get the impression,
that's just speculation and fanfic in your head.
Yeah, no. But I get the impression, yes. But in spite of that, she still loved him. And to the point where when he's sort of dogging on himself, like, she's like, no, not nothing. Kind of that his whole life is nothing. She was almost mad at him for saying that.
Well, that's insulting to her and the family that they built together.
Yes, of course. But I think that in addition to that, it was almost like, how dare you say that about the man I love kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, you could view it that way too.
Yeah. I mean,
in my mind, that
was my interpretation, because even like the scene where she has dinner with John Mahoney's character, when they walk home, she basically is like, well, you're not coming into my house because I'm a married woman and I know who I am.
Yeah. That's the difference between her and a young girl who's just like, eh.
Right.
Yeah, she knows. She even says that you don't know squat about women.
Women, yeah. Yeah, it was really good writing in this thing. Really good writing. Definitely deserved the Oscar. Anything else? Anything else jump out at you? What about the moon?
I mean, the moon thing is just sort of like, it's romance. That's like another thing about old world cultures. It's like people are affected by the moon.
Yeah.
Whether for good or for bad. The wolf.
Yeah.
They keep mentioning that, you're a wolf and just the connection there. I don't really think the moon actually was influencing anybody. It's just sort of like that, it's so big and romantic. And the last time I saw a moon like that was when, what did the uncle say? When
Vincent Gardenia was outside
of Rose's window.
So, yeah.
And that's the sign of romance.
Yeah. And Cosmo. I keep forgetting. Yeah. I was like, what is his name? Cosmo.
And clearly it had an effect on the uncle, because it's just like after he turned around and the wife is just like, you look like you're 20. Rita. You look like you're 25 years old in that light.
Yeah.
And he's just like, yeah. And like he goes over to the bed and it was funny.
Raymond and Rita.
It was. I mean, it was funny, but it was like it reminded me of when my Aunt Josephine told us that story. Because
let's not repeat that Rita, story, please.
When he got in the bed, Rita turned her back to him.
Yes. Oh my goodness! Stop yourself! Oh yeah. What else did I want to talk about this film? We watched this on the TCM app, and fun fact from our host Ben Mankiewicz about how originally the beginning was opera.
Oh yeah, the song they played over the opening credits, they test screened it, and at first, because opera plays a pivotal part in the movie, they played opera, and people, when they watched the movie, the producers were just like baffled, because the first half hour nobody laughed at all, and they're like, "What's going on? We have this great script, there's jokes and stuff." No reaction from the audience, and then what they realized was it was the opera just cast a sort of like
gloom, doom.
A more serious tone that didn't match what was going on the screen, and people just couldn't react. And then they switched it to the Dean Martin song.
That's Amore.
And everybody just loved it. Right. It was from beginning to end, people just loved it. And it's just interesting how something like that, the fact that
changes the tone. Yeah,
exactly. When you have like, you set the tone with this opening montage or credit sequence with this song, you set the tone with that song, and then you completely subvert that tone with something else. It changes. It sort of like breaks the audience.
Yeah.
You're not going to get the reaction that you want. So fixing that just like
help the movie. Yeah.
Fix the beginning of the movie.
Yeah. Again, this went on to win an Academy Award for Cher as Loretta, the main actress, Olympia Dukakis as Rose in a supporting role, and also John Patrick Shanley for his screenplay for the film. 1 to 10, what would you give this film?
This was good. I'd give it a 7.
I think I too would give it a 7. It's still sharp from 1987, still hits, still funny, still crazy, still makes you think about the Italians that you know. And again, like I said before, I love stuff filmed in New York, and I love stuff that captures the essence of the city. Having been born and raised in Brooklyn, to see, I guess, my old stomping grounds immortalized in film is always a treat. So this didn't disappoint in that section. So it was nice to see what the city looked like in the 80s, or reminisce about what the city looked like in the 80s. As far as romantic stories, what did you think about this film? I mean, is it believable that somebody like Loretta would fall for somebody like Ronny in that particular circumstance? I mean, she seemed like we'd said before, she seemed like a very straight arrow with a good head on her shoulders, and then to all of a sudden kind of go wild.
This is a movie romance. They're basically going to take extremes with it. And yeah, believability, no. But for a movie, yeah, I mean, nobody goes to see we met each other and we got along, we had a lot in common, and nothing really exciting or super passionate happened, but we got together and we got married. Nobody really goes to see that. If that's part of the story, that's like the backstory for the hero when his whole family gets slaughtered, and then he has to go on a revenge spree. For the focus of a romantic comedy like this, you got to have a little bit of suspension of disbelief as far as like people just being enveloped by their passion. I mean, if you legitimately met that Nick Cage screaming in the basement of a blazing hot
bakery,
bread bakery, screaming about the absence of his hand and getting the big knife so he could murder himself in front of her. You wouldn't be like, let's go upstairs and have some alcohol.
Yes, you would be running.
You would be like, all right,
go.
You don't have to come to the wedding after all.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, I'll explain it to Johnny.
Yeah, I'll explain to Johnny. You're sweating profusely. You're screaming. You look deranged.
You're filthy.
You're filthy. We don't have to. You don't have to come if you don't want to.
Seriously. Yeah, it's so funny. Like the first time I saw this film, I've always liked Nick Cage though. So
yeah,
but he is just manic in the beginning of this. I mean, he tones it down when they go on their date, I guess, and then when he shows up at her house, basically like before he asks her to marry him.
And that's another thing. He's known her for a day, and he's like, "We're getting married."
Well, love at first sight. See, it doesn't
there you
exist.
go. And love at first sight only works in romantic, deranged comedies where the people just behaving in ways that are in no way realistic.
Anything else we want to talk about, or I think we've covered everything. I think there's not really much to. I mean, this is a movie from 1987. I'm surprised that you hadn't seen this before today.
In 1987, I was not in any way interested in romantic comedies.
87.
Yeah, 1987.
Oh, okay. I thought you said 97.
No, in 1987, I was no way interested in romantic comedies. If people's heads weren't being chopped off or exploding or both,
you didn't want to know about it.
I really wasn't. I was too interested.
All right, fair enough. I just, I mean, this was a big monster hit. Mm-hmm. It won Academy Awards. It was a big thing for Cher. I liked her performance in this. I think she was better in other things like Mask or Silkwood, but she didn't win for those. So I guess this was the pity Oscar.
She was in Silkwood?
She was in Silkwood. She was with Meryl Streep. And who was the guy? Is it Kurt Russell? I can't remember.
Silkwood. I thought Silkwood was Meryl Streep?
Yeah. Now you're going to make me look.
I thought Silkwood was Sally Field.
No.
Or was that Norma Ray?
That's Norma Ray, yeah.
You know what? You're probably right. I think Silkwood was one of those films I was dragged to when I was a kid.
Yes, Meryl Streep, Kurt Russell, Cher.
That was about like
Mike Nichols.
Radiation or something, right?
A worker at a plutonium processing plant is purposely contaminated, psychologically tortured, and possibly murdered to prevent her from exposing worker safety violations at the plant.
All right, we're on a tangent.
Well, Cher's in the movie. And one of the writers was Nora Ephron, who we loved from the AFI thing.
Yes, very funny.
Very, very funny. What did we think about the Mona character? We don't really see too much of her, but
she was a prop.
She was a prop. What about you and I? I sort of turned to you at one point, and I was like, I liked Rose better. Why would Cosmo cheat on Rose with Mona?
Because she wasn't Rose.
I guess
Rose was the lunch you've been eating for 40 years, and Mona was just the big greasy cheesesteak that only comes from that one food truck that appears randomly.
Is that how it is? That's an interesting description. Interesting.
There you go.
What about, at one point, doesn't Rose turn to Loretta and say that she's like her father because I guess she's cheated on Johnny with Ronny? What did you think of that comparison?
I don't know, because I didn't feel like there was any love between
Loretta and
Johnny.
Yeah,
whereas Rose and Cosmo, love was there because that's where she got that, do you love him? And when she was like, she's like, that's good because love is messy and whatnot. And she would know from experience because she loved Cosmo. So it's a far deeper betrayal. So yeah, I don't really know if there's, I don't know if they're the same in that respect. And you really won't know until 40 years down the line, right. I guess.
I agree.
If they decide to cheat then.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so 7-7, definitely catch it.
Mm-hmm.
We did catch it on the TCM app, but I think it's going away. But it is playing elsewhere, so if you haven't seen it, definitely check it out. If you have seen it in the past, might be a nice little thing to revisit. It's definitely a lovely story that still holds up even after all these years.
Yeah.
All right, that's it from us, and we will bid you all a
good night.
Good night.